In this episode of the LS430 project, we're gonna replace me with that engine. Or so I thought. In case you're new to the channel, I scored this 2001 Lexus LS430 for a great deal. And as you've probably already seen in the old videos, it's in really good shape, except there's a bit of a catch. And if you've been following along, you know that there's a reason we have two different transmissions here. So this car was such a good deal because this transmission is toasted. Likely never did they replace the fluid or do any preventative maintenance. But up until now, I have torn way down into the engine, pulled the camshafts out, resealed everything in terms of VVTi, all the gears, brand new bolts, brand new seals, everything. And in today's episode, we're going to get quite a bit further. We're gonna get the water pump and all the timing components put back on, oil pump, lower and upper pans, which will then mean I can spin everything to get this transmission disconnected, get this one put back on, and we can get the engine and the transmission back in the car. Since last you saw it, not that much has changed, except I do have these cam wheels bolted down. These actually are the bolts that show up in the factory manual, and what was in place of it was these little gold bolts, and these just strip out so easily. So those have been swapped. I went ahead and replaced the camshaft position sensor here because the old connector was broken on the other one. The old sensor was really dirty and yucky looking, and I don't really want to fiddle with this. It was 80 bucks, so it's kind of expensive, but I just went ahead and swapped that out. And then among many other new parts, we also have OE Denso spark plugs along with the coil packs as well, because the other ones were no-name part store brand, and we can't rock that. I want this thing to be better than perfect. In the previous episode, you'll remember I pulled off the oil pump and then the other pans and got these all cleaned up. So we need to get this resealed and put back on. I pulled the oil pump off specifically because there is an O-ring that goes in the block right there, as well as it's just basically secured on, in terms of leakage with just the Toyota FIPG. So while I already had the lower and upper pans off, I went ahead and just decided that I wanted to reseal everything. First step, we gotta FIPG this oil pump all the way around before we can put it back on. And the factory service manual is really comprehensive and shows us exactly where we have to put it. It's really not that hard. It's basically just on the interior edge all the way around. Okay, and then the pump you can see has those flats in it, and those are just gonna match up to the flat part on the crankshaft snout. So all I really need to do is just kind of turn it roughly the orientation that I need it. So just turn the little keys, make the little flats like that roughly. Oh, the O-ring! That would have been terrible. And you know what I just realized as well? It's actually gonna be way easier to put the front crankshaft seal in it like this while it's not around the snout of the crankshaft. So I think what I'm gonna do is clean off all this FIPG while it's still wet and get that seal in there and then do it again. Okay, so here's the brand new front crank seal, and then I accidentally threw away the old seal, so I'm gonna use this orange juice bottle cap to try and press it in there flat. The pump isn't quite as pretty as it was. Some of this FIPG is really hard to get out, some of this residual that's left over. Okie dokie, take two. There we go. Oh, let's move the whole stand back. Let you go on. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Then of course we have our 10 million D1 bolts here, and luckily, I don't quite remember where they go, but the service manual tells us, and their torque specs. Then we're just gonna lightly run them down. You might have seen me yeet my 3/4 drive torque wrench before because it wasn't working properly, but Harbor Freight's warranty is lit. I just walked in, said it doesn't work, and they gave me a new one. So we'll be able to properly torque these, which is great. These 12mm bolts around the perimeter are only 11 foot-pounds. Looks like we're already there. Then this 14mm is 22 foot-pounds. Oil pump is officially back on and resealed, which is great. Okay, so now it's time for our pickup tube to go back on. There is a little gasket right here, which I have, so let's get that on. I actually didn't even realize this is just a simple little paper gasket, so didn't have to order OEM, but of course, your boy did. All right, pickup tube is back on, which means our next challenger awaits. Quick little spray down, because it's been a bit since I've messed with this. And then a quick little wipe down just to get all the crap off of here. All right, so the FIPG around the whole top of the upper pan just goes on the inside edge of all the bolts all the way around, nice and easy. Here we go, all the way around. Got all my bolts lined up in the orientation that they go for the upper pan, so let's go ahead and get that beast stuck back on there. Come around the pickup. Yeah. Get the dipstick tube back in there. Come on. Please. Why is this so hard? Where's me stud? This is so difficult. Wow, that is not fun. It's not tight, but it's at least held up in there, but boy, whew, that sucks. We just gotta tighten it down now, and then we'll be able to put the lower pan back on. It's really exciting. It's starting to look more like an engine again. Now we're just gonna torque everything. These ones up here are really low. They're actually 66 inch-pounds, but I'm just gonna go with 10 foot-pounds, basically as low as my torque range will go, and we'll be fine. And then all the rest of them are 12 millimeter, and those are 21 foot-pounds. So we'll just adjust this up. Then next up, the oil pan baffle goes in. Another thing I'm doing is putting a new gasket on this oil level sensor, because these things don't typically go bad, but what I wanted to show you was this gasket is so rock hard that it breaks almost like it was plastic. And look at this. This is very clearly rubber. So wild. This goes into the side of the upper pan, so this is just another point for oil to leak, and I don't want that, so while it's easily accessible, figured I could pull it out. I was wondering why it was so hard to get that off, but that's why. There we go, new gasket is on, and then we can just slot this right back in the side of the upper pan here, just exactly as it goes. And luckily, as you know, I broke this connector when I took it off, but that was available from the dealer for like $2. And so we'll swap out that plug here in a little bit as well. We're gonna have to do a bunch of repanning of these connectors. There's this one and tons of other ones that I've broken along the way, all of which I have replacements for. And it's pretty simple. I mean, you just need to note the orientation of the wires. So we got this like white, black one as we face the front of the connector on the right, and then the green one goes into the left. And really all we have to do is you can kind of just stick your little flathead in there. I mean, in this case, it's just breaking the connector even more, which is honestly kind of convenient because we should just be able to slide these plugs out here in just a second once we break this connector even more. And then there's, you can see the one on the right is popping out a little bit more, and just like that, pull it on out. So once you get that old connector off, on your new one, there's gonna be that little thing that sticks out. So you don't wanna press that in just yet, but if you do, you can just get a little flathead right under there and pull it back out, because Toyota is awesome and thinks about that kind of stuff. So then all we need to do is just set the orientation like this, got the little divot, stick them both in, try to get it lined up as straight as possible. There we go. Then you can hear that nice little click. They pop in, push our little thing in the middle back, and boom, baby, we got a repin connector. Ah, yes. Woohoo! Then I've got a little dipstick tube O-ring as well. Slot this on. Right back in she goes. And we got the lower pan FIPG'd up, all clean and ready to go. There we go, lower pan's back on, just gotta torque it down and we are cooking with gas, as they say. Now that we got the bottom end of the engine put back together, let's put some of these new goodies on. Old spark plugs coming out. NGK iridiums, not mad at it. Let's just see if they all match. I am pleasantly surprised to see that they're all NGK iridium, but look at how old that dielectric grease is on the top for all of them. It looks disgusting. So, still glad that we're swapping these. Plugs don't look terrible. They look pretty normal. None of them have any problems, so I think we're good. Old ones. So I'm using the Denso, like iridium spark plug. This is what was considered OE, correct gap and everything. Torque spec on these is 13 foot-pounds. Now just repeat 7 more times. So next up we have our brand new Denso OE ignition coils. These are exactly the same ones that you would have gotten from Toyota, except they just say Denso on them instead of Toyota. These are ridiculously expensive at basically $50 each, which is insanely painfully expensive. But of course, having brand new ignition coils is gonna make such a big difference just to the smoothness and the reliability of the engine. I don't wanna get stranded with a bad coil pack because of some no-name that was on it before. Slot this right in. 100, 150, 200. Boom, baby. Now that we got brand new plugs and coils on all 8 cylinders, something that's gonna make me very happy is taking this no-name junk. See ya. Another one. And this Denso is a worthy sacrifice. That one might not even be real, who knows? Now that our front end is put together, we can go ahead and slot our little crankshaft pulley thingy here. Just right back on, should just slot back in like that. So I wanna go ahead and get the brand new engine mounts on because of course we got easy access to it right now and it would be a nightmare to do it while it's in the car. But I wanted to point out, just like the LS400, my Celsior project, you can see side by side, this engine mount is a whole lot more smushed and it's separating here at this top layer. So eventually with some more mileage, this is going to completely separate. And that is not the case over here. And then, I mean, you can see it's just like, this one is just smushed quite a bit more. Same thing is true on both sides. It's really kind of incredible because of course I drove this car a little bit before I pulled the engine and transmission out, and there was nothing that would lead me to believe the engine mounts were bad. The car was still so smooth. So hopefully this makes it even better. And of course, when we get to that point, I have a brand new transmission mount as well. And this is definitely something that you can do with everything still in the car. This, in my Celsior video, when I replaced it, made such a massive difference to just like the general vibration that came through the chassis. So you should definitely consider doing this. It's not a very expensive part. It's about 90 bucks OEM, and it will definitely make a big difference. So that's something that you can do while everything is still in the car. We're now finally at the point where we can start rebuilding the front of the engine, and that of course means new water pump and timing components. But one thing I wanted to show you is that this ASIN kit, which is basically the OE manufacturer for these, is so much nicer than what was on it, and I wanted to point out some of the key differences there. Now, as we know, this engine was heavily neglected, and whoever they took this to just didn't really care about it, which is sad. And one thing that I wanted to point out that I noticed right away is this water pump is Dayco, and I don't think Dayco is a particularly bad brand, but look at the way that they cut costs. I mean, if you take a look at the pump, of course, most of the things are fairly similar, but if we look at this more closely side by side, you can see that the webbing and kind of the casting of this water pump from ASIN is nice and solid. Everything is joined together. But if we look over here, all this stuff, that's all like open. And every single piece that should be cast, like these little pieces of webbing and these little pipes, everything is heavier duty on the ASIN kit. It's just so much better quality. Everything is just nicer. This pump kind of wheel assembly looks nicer. I mean, overall, it's very, very similar on the Dayco side, but I mean, look, you can just see where they cut costs. So who knows what's going on inside there and what, you know, quality sort of cuts were made inside the pump. So this kit, this ASIN kit is only 180 bucks for everything. Belt, tensioners, pulleys, gasket, new bolts, everything. So it's like, why would you even bother? I mean, just look at the difference here at how much further this pump sticks out versus this one. I mean, it's just not the same. The quality is just worse in every way. Let's go ahead and get this new pump installed. I've already cleaned off this surface multiple times, even though it kind of doesn't look like it. First up is the new gasket. Slip it on both these studs like that. And then the kit comes with these O-rings. The small one goes around this tube right here. And then the big one will go on the thermostat assembly, which we'll install later. A little bit of silicone spray so it doesn't go on dry. Like that, perfect. Then we can slot our pump in place. Careful not to pinch our brand new camshaft sensor wire. Our pipe up here needs to be pushed in just a little bit to align up, and I can't get that with my fingers. Okay, then we've got our little nut down here, and this one went on the end of this stud, but there's still like the tensioner or something else that goes right here, so that'll come later. The ASIN kit comes with 5 new bolts. These are aluminum bolts, so you're not supposed to reuse them. I highly doubt the Dayco kit that I just showed you came with that, so we're gonna go ahead and just slot these in. And then the water pump has these 2 studs that go in there and there. Then I'll just progressively run all these bolts down. Torque spec on the bolts is 15 foot-pounds, and then on the stud nuts and this other nut, it's 13. The torque wrench is good, but it doesn't have such a satisfying click. I want it to be really loud, like pow! Water pump is on and torque down. Next up comes the number 1 and number 2 timing belt pulleys that go into that big spot right there, and then also over there. This pulley just has this 1 bolt that goes in just right over here. And then our other pulley goes on the tensioner side with this wacky looking bolt. Make sure you don't forget to put the washer on the back side of this pulley like that. This pulley down here is a 10 Allen and it's torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Then same thing, the other pulley right here is also torqued to 25. It is a 14 mil. So now we can go ahead and just loosely route our timing belt. Luckily when it's brand new, there's these marks. So this one is the crankshaft, and then we'll have one for R cam and L cam, so it's nice and easy to line up. Okay, so crankshaft down there. It's gonna go like right there. Almost there, just out of slack here. Get this one lined up. Oh no, I have the belt backwards. No! Dang it. I wish I realized this sooner. The arrows are supposed to point out. That's probably why I was having such a difficult time with this. Dang it. Turns out when you do it properly, it's a whole lot easier. So it's R cam from the perspective of the driver, not our side. So the R cam line in our case is marking up with the T, because of course we went a little bit past top dead center on that mark. On the L cam side, same thing. We're lined up nice and solid. And then down here, there's a small little indentation there where you can see that single white line lines up, and then it says crank. That's the arrow there. And then there's another little two sets of white dots that line up with the little bolt hole in our cogwheel. So we are in time. This is the side that has less tension. You can see this one has a lot more because we're gonna install the tensioner here now. And as we tighten that up, it's gonna pull the belt tension, which is exactly what we want. Brand new tensioner going in. So we just have to slowly and progressively tighten up these bolts. And then once we're totally sure everything's good, we'll pull the pin and let the tensioner be at full strength. And then the tensioner's torque is 19 foot-pounds. Before we pull the pin, I just want to double check that all of our marks are still dialed in perfectly. R cam is nailed. Then L cam is locked in. And it's a little bit hard to see, but the mark on the crank is still locked in as well. So we are good to go. Let's go ahead and pull this pin. Perfect. A little bit more tension on it. I'm gonna go ahead and spin the engine over, but so I don't forget, we have to get this crank cogwheel back into place, because this is what the crankshaft position sensor picks up to know where the engine is. And then of course it uses the camshaft sensor in relation to that as well. So forgetting this would mean that the engine wouldn't start and we'd have to tear way back down into the engine again, which would be absolutely awful. So we definitely don't want to forget that. And then of course, you want to make sure that you put it in the correct direction with the indentation kind of sticking out. Before I forget, I do not want to leave this cover off, and that just goes right in there. And then next comes this little cover. I'm also just really proud of how far we've come on this project. I mean, this right here looks like a brand new engine compared to where we started. Like the level of oil and just seepage that was everywhere around here on this cam cap, down the belt, the front of the motor. I mean, it's all just completely transformed, which was exactly my goal. So much progress here. It's really, really exciting. All right, so now I'm just gonna tighten this crank pulley bolt down and do 2 or 3 full revolutions of the engine just to make sure everything's good and in time. Compression. Yeah. All right, so we got 2 full revolution turns. Now it's a little bit confusing because the arrow no longer lines up with the mark, but the one that we were using, this little tiny little notch there, lines up with the TDC mark on both sides. And then our crank pulley lines up with the 0 for top dead center. So was able to get 2 full revolutions out of the engine, which means we're safe to proceed and throw even more new parts at this thing. But before that, look at all this gloriousness. This one too. And this one too. Next up is the brand new OEM belt tensioner. This gets buried behind a bunch of other covers, so we need to go ahead and put this on now. These are only 12 foot-pounds. Tensioner on. And before I forget, the crank pulley is torqued to 181 foot-pounds, which equates to a couple of ugga-duggas. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that before I forget. Next up, we have the fan pulley bracket, which in this case is not really part of the clutch fan assembly, since of course on the LS430 we have an E fan. This is really just a pulley for the belt, but I didn't feel like messing around with that. I mean, you can see that that one is a lot more loose than this one here, and of course it's way cleaner, so I wanted to go brand new. There we go. Oh wait, this one doesn't go here. The cover is gonna go right here and here, so this one comes over there. That's more like it. These 12mm bolts are 12 foot-pounds, which I'm already set at, which is perfect. And then the 14s are 24 foot-pounds. This cover can go on here. I wanted to show you guys something else, which is that these cam covers have these gaskets on them. And when I took them off, I was like, I don't think they should be this rock hard. Like, they literally just snap. But I ordered some new ones, and of course they're just a good old rubber gasket. So crazy. These things were so rock hard that they were essentially worthless. New gasket is on, so I'll go ahead and pop the camshaft sensor through, and then once we just line this up in its home, the little gold stud helps us line that up there, which is perfect. And then 4 bolts. Then we got a new little grommet here. There we go. Perfecto. And then we'll do the same thing to the other side. And then unlike how it was when we took this off, the only part of this thermostat neck assembly that needs FIPG is this bit right here. This is just an O-ring, so don't put FIPG on there. A little bit of silicone spray on the O-ring there for that to go in easily. And then this should just slot right in. There we go. Try not to smear it too badly. We're just gonna go with 13 foot-pounds on these, since these are just 12s. We can go ahead and pop on our brand new idler pulley here as well. And just 24 foot-pounds in this one. Forgot to do something super important. Now that we got the whole front end of the engine rebuilt, it is finally time to get this old transmission off. What was hanging us up before, and the reason we couldn't do that was because of course the timing belt wasn't on, and there's a bunch of different flywheel bolts we have to get off. There's about 6 bolts that exist underneath there, which I left the cover off so we can still access. But we got to get the harness off, get this dipstick tube separated, get those bolts off, and then I'll have to get that transmission separated. I'm going to put it back down on the ground to try to make it easier, and then we will heave this one back on. Here's a better representation of what we're going to be doing. So we're going to have to just turn the engine over to get access to each of these flywheel bolts. I mean, technically they're part of the flex plate because it's an auto, but we'll have to basically get each one down to the bottom, take it out, spin, and then we'll just reverse the process to put this back in. The other thing we have to do is swap out these power steering pressure lines, because I've got all of that, as well as a new reservoir that will go in here as well. And while I have the opportunity, I want to go ahead and degrease the whole subframe and the steering rack and stuff. So I'll go ahead and knock all of that out as well. All right, party people, a new day has dawned, and it's time to get this transmission off of this beautiful refreshed engine. So what we have to do is go up underneath here and get those bolts out. You can see that there's a missing bolt on that flex plate there, kind of up in the upper right of that shot. And I already got one of the bolts out, so I just got to turn it over and get 5 more out. Okay, 2 of 6. All right, all 6 are out. And what we need to do now is go ahead and disconnect a bunch of these connectors. Hopefully I don't break them, because some of these are very specific, like that transmission big one right there. Definitely have to order that. So we'll need to get these couple of plugs undone. And then on the other side, when I was first trying to pull this out, I thought maybe I would leave the transmission behind, but I spun this hose right here, and that needs to come off. So I can get to this now, because otherwise the kind of body of the car is in the way and you can't get a wrench up here. Same thing on this one, I need to get that disconnected. Fortunately, I do have a new one of these hoses, but I could not find this one. So we'll have to reuse this one. And then otherwise we just need to get the rest of the bolts out, and our transmission should just come right back. Okay, so we need a 17 on this lower portion, and then it's a 19 on this upper. So this one already undone a little bit. There we go. There we go. That's the way to do it. And I'll just separate that later. Wish me luck on this one, party people. Oh, I should have known better. Are we gonna do any better back here? Nope, that one immediately snapped. I barely put any force on that. That one broke immediately too. That's super fun. Got a bolt here for the harness, got another one there. This sensor, I'll pull that off definitely, just in case that ever goes bad. This connector will almost assuredly break. Then it looks like we just have a bolt for this bracket, and a bolt behind this big 17 on the bell housing holds the rest of that trans harness down. Let's see, is this one gonna break? Yep, immediately. Other than the awful sounds of cracking and snapping, this trans harness is loose. And then just a bunch of 17s. So if I'm not mistaken, this should now separate. Probably will be a bit of a fight here, but might be able to just, oh yeah, it's coming right off. Woo! Big moment. Hell yeah. While we're here, we're gonna go ahead and get this flex plate off and redo the rear main seal right behind here. I can't tell if it's leaking, but I don't wanna take the chance. So we're gonna go ahead and just get it done. Don't wanna forget that. I'm glad we're doing this. Look at how gross this sealant is. That's all old and definitely looks like we've had some seepage around here at the very least. Another little plate. Yep. You can tell, same thing like when we took the oil pump off, all this old dried sealant all the way around here. This has probably never been done. And then this is part of the lower cover, but of course we didn't do this portion of it because we didn't reach all the way back here. So we did get some here, which was kind of joining together with the rear main, but we're gonna have to pull this stuff off on the bottom, clean off this little edge here, and then we'll reapply right along here for our rear main with some FIPG. All right, so I popped the old rear main seal out really easily, actually with the cylinder like ring compressor tool that I bought for my F-150 project, which you can watch on this channel also, where I rebuilt the engine on that. But we can super easily go ahead and put this new rear main seal in. It doesn't go in that deep, and there is a nice little channel there to stop it. So you can't go too far, which is amazing. In this case, we can just take the old seal, put it right on top and just tap it around and it'll go right in. I love when they have little grooves like that. Hard day at the office over here. Had to take me a little Whataburger break. Of course, another new O-ring going in. Looks a little bit bigger than its hole, but it just kind of slots in there just like that. This is the same one, same part number that is used on the front side of the engine that you saw earlier as well. Got a layer of FIPG down there too, so let's go ahead and put the rear main back on. Try to get this in as straight as possible over the back end of the crank here. Help guide the lip of the seal in just a little bit. There we go. There we go. Just gonna go 10 foot-pounds on these. They're small bolts. Actually, I'm not even gonna do 10 because that feels like too much. G2G, rear main on, new rear main seal, fresh gasket maker. So we are set. All right, so I got my little plate on here and there was some thread locker on these bolts, which was some sort of like orangish red. I'm gonna go ahead and just use blue because that's what I got and that will be totally fine. But we need to go ahead and get this lined up, get our flex plate and the other cover back lined up, and we'll be good to go. All right, and then the torque spec on these bolts is 24 plus 90 degrees. And I am not gonna be able to do that because I don't have a way to hold the crank easily. So I'm just gonna run these down and impact them. This gun typically does about like 110, 120 foot-pounds, something like that on a conservative, you know, ugga-dugga. So that should be good. So I've run into a bit of a problem that I kind of forgot about. These three exhaust studs are totally fine and I can thread nuts onto them easily, but when I was taking the exhaust off originally, that stud broke off clean inside of there. This one broke off a minute ago when I was trying to unscrew it, and then same thing here. So I'm gonna try to bust out my welder, weld a nut onto this one. This one, I can't get a bolt to catch on there, so I'll probably just get this one off or find one similar to that and just weld it straight to this and try to unbolt it that way. But we shall see if this will work. That looks better, kinda. All right, I gave it a bit to cool. Let's see if that did anything for us. Oh, turn the whole engine. Nope, just tearing up the nut. That's awesome. That is not ideal. My God, it lifts the entire engine. Well, that's a lost cause. Mother effer, dude.
Give me fuel, give me fire, give me downward charges.
I'm obviously being silly, but I bought a MAP gas torch to hopefully light those studs up and get them out of there. So hopefully this fixes it, we'll see. Get this thing screaming hot. That upper one didn't work, but I don't think I was getting it hot enough, so trying again down here. Trying to turn this thing red. There we go. Oh my God, what an unbelievable disaster. Still just won't budge. What I'm gonna do is cut through the ears of this flange on each of the sides, come down through the top with an angle grinder and get those studs out, and then we'll just put a through bolt through it. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I don't think that's gonna come out still though. Oh my gosh, nothing is working. This is turning into a disaster. I went ahead and heated up and pulled out one of those exhaust studs, so I think I'm just going to proceed with pulling the whole manifold off on both sides, which is such an annoyance because I might as well get it off so I can fix this and replace the exhaust manifold gasket since it's only 20 bucks and do it while I have it out. But man, what a disaster this is turning into. I'm so bummed and annoyed at this. Well, forgot about something else. The friggin' O2 sensor. Oh my God, it's always something. Luckily, all of the nuts came off by themselves, left all the studs except one. So I'll be able to do the double nut trick to get these out easily and not tear up the end of this thing. I don't know what I'm gonna do here because these manifolds new are quite expensive and I'm sure these sensors are expensive too. So very, very unfortunate. This has turned into an utter disaster over here. And this video has gotten out of control. I mean, I didn't anticipate having to do any of this. This manifold, because of these studs being stuck in it, in my opinion, is now basically done. Another thing that just happened is the little stud, the little ear that holds on the heat shield. You can see there's two on that side, and there's supposed to be two on this side. That broke off while it was still up there, so clearly this manifold is on its way out. And now I need 16 new studs, I need 16 new nuts, I need an exhaust gasket for this side and the other side. Oh man. Oh, also O2 sensors. I mean, these are nearly impossible to swap out while they're on the car. So, I mean, that's another 100 bucks in sensors. I found a used manifold on eBay that looks in much nicer shape than this for about 100 bucks. So much more money and time and effort, and frustration is just so frustrating, but I know ultimately this is all going to be amazing. It's just this hurdle after hurdle after hurdle I've encountered, and this exhaust situation is by far the biggest one. Next time there really should be nothing left from stopping us putting this transmission back in the car. I mean, you can see right there I have the transmission fluid ready. I thought I was going to be doing that in this video. So made it this far in the video, you're clearly the most dedicated fan, and I can't thank you enough. Consider hitting the join button. There are some memberships with a couple of exclusive kind of deals that you can get if you're interested. No pressure, obviously, you can just enjoy the content, but it would mean the world to me. Otherwise, I'll see you in the very next video where hopefully we'll be putting the engine back in the car. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.